Welcome to the Infinite Creative Podcast. My name is Fitz, and this is...
My name is Sean. Hello, everybody.
Oh, new year, new me. We're back, and we got a really good episode, I think. Sean, introduce the episode.
Okay, if you tell me to introduce it, I think I will introduce it. Yeah, so in this episode, we're going to talk about when creativity goes too far, right? Like, when do initiatives fail? When do they fall over the edge? And from there, we may talk in some of the kind of news, the creative news, also talk a little bit about ourselves and the craziness in our life. But yeah, stay tuned. It's going to be another fun episode, everybody.
Yay. On that note, actually, I had that idea, I think, 2 weeks ago, and I got really inspired by one of my buddies. He's just like, hey, I don't sleep. Like, obviously, he's sleeping, but he's like, hey, I have to stay up till 3 at night. And I'm like, he's being a little bit self-destructive with doing his art and his craft and basically cuts it off his, like, joy and fun. And I was like, oh, I'm too comfortable. And then that made me think about, do you have to be, as an artist, be a little bit self-destructive or basically take from other parts of your life and, yeah, fuel your art and basically let it consume you a little bit more? And, yeah, and here we are.
Yeah, I think that's great. You do see, like, throughout time, you've seen artists that kind of, go too far. And I think we both have seen that, like, sometimes the best art can come from, like, the worst times, right? Like, the best creative ideas can come from suffering. Yeah, so with that, I think there's been examples, like, recently. I think we can start with more recent examples. I think so.
I saw some wind noise on yours.
Some wind noise?
Yeah.
Oh, there should be no wind noise. But anyway, so we're going to talk about Kanye West to start. I think he's the most recent thing in the lexicon of people.
Yeah.
He was a great rapper. He moved into other arenas. People told him, you're going too far. You're outside of your lane. I'd say he arguably proved them wrong, had his own clothing line, did these other things. And then recently went too far, went anti-Semitic. Yeah. Now, some people have argued, I think you know a little bit about this as well, is that he maybe did some of this anti-Semitism on purpose to get out of being controlled by and things like that. So this was almost a strategic move, right?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I was like kind of, first off, I saw the news, you saw the news. I'm like, what the hell is going on in his head? And he has that crazy outlook on life where he's just like, hey, I dress how I want. And the more controversial, the better it is. And I'm just like, okay, he's just like being an extreme artist. And it really made sense to think like he goes bonkers and it's just like off the rails and whatever. And then later, I hear, he got dropped by Adidas and all those things. They basically have his name in so they can make money on like merch and whatever. And he maybe saved now billions or millions of dollars because he got dropped and can sell now by himself without sharing. But he made them drop him. So it could be a mastermind, but it could be also just off the rails. But I was like inspired because on the one side, not what he's saying, but how he's dressing, how he's just so free expressing himself in a weird way so that it's like really controversial. And if you go through history, there's a lot of artists who basically did that, like Dali, for example. And every big artist has something where they're like, okay, I'm way different than everybody else. And it's nearly a must-have, kind of. And I'm like, that's the vibe I got from him. And I'm like, obviously, nobody's perfect, and he said a lot of bad things.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it is interesting to see what's next. But yeah, he's a great example. Maybe he's now gone too far. He thought he could game the system, use a way to tactically terminate himself that, what you can do in like a work scenario, right? You can just be so annoying that they fire you, and then you can get unemployment. I've heard of that actually happening where you as long as you stay in the work policy, you just are so annoying, you fart all the time, you do all these things that aren't really against the rules, they'll just fire you. And then I've heard of people that actually do that. So that feels like that's what he did. But but maybe he's gone too far. It's funny, that point where you can keep pushing the button, but then you just maybe fall through. And I feel like maybe he's fallen through, and maybe I think there's argument he won't recover now. I don't.
Could be. But on the one side, like, he's still a genius in his craft music. I have with clothing and stuff like that, it's more like, oh yeah, he's one of those designers that are too extreme and crazy. But that's what gets the attention. When you imagine a catwalk, you always imagine like a pretty woman in a trash bag and making a weird catwalk. And this is modern, this is art, but nobody will wear it. That's the vibe that I get from his clothing line. But the music has a big following, and it's cult. So
yeah, I agree. You're right. It is cult-like, and it's interesting. So it's like
cult.
Cult. And I think it's so it's interesting, and I think it's always that moment where people fall off the end of the bandwagon, and the media does their big story on it. I think another person that we can pull up here would Will Smith. I think he's another example of someone who one night, one action for anyone that's looking at a rock.
You think that broke him? You think that broke him, though? Yeah.
Yeah, so slapping someone in a thing. So I made sure to put a poster here of his newest movie, Emancipation, which is doing terrible. And a lot of people are arguing maybe it's just a bad movie, but that
plenty of movies that didn't do well with him. Like, where I'm like, yeah, could be.
So do you think that it's had no effect? Is that kind of what your argument is? Because I would almost say it probably has, at least for a little bit. There's going to take time now to wash.
So in media, everybody says like any publicity is good publicity, and I actually got hooked on Wolf on that year or the year before because he's like relaunching like his YouTube, and it's okay. I'm a big actor, and nobody really uses YouTube to its full potential. He paid a couple of videographers big bucks to basically do vlogs and then movies, and there was like really an arc and a storyline to it. And he's probably one of the biggest actors with like a really decent history of good, successful series like Prince of Bel-Air and all that stuff, or what was it, I don't know. He has plenty of movies that are like top movies. So he's like a top of the line actor, and he built like a lot of momentum, but I feel like after the slap, the marriage basically killed his momentum, and now he's falling under it. It's less the slap, in my opinion. It's more the marriage drama.
Yeah. And so for everyone out there, if you don't know, what Fitzy's talking about is Jada Pinkett Smith and him sat on a podcast. I think they had their own podcast for a little bit, where they put out on the table that they had a polyamorous relationship that was completely open, and that they had run into a love triangle with actually, I think one of their son's friends actually ended up sleeping with Jada Pinkett Smith. So that was out. That dirty laundry was out in the open. And so that's why a lot of people think the slap happened during, I think it was the Grammys or the Oscars. I can't even remember now. The Oscars or the Grammys. It must have been the Oscars. And he was called out by the host for something with his wife. And that's why he said, get your sort of name out of your explicit mouth. And so it's interesting. I think you're right. It has something to do with that family dynamic, and now that's spilled out into the public. But it's interesting because just that one piece of violence, which some people could defend. I think you being a husband, you've been in that place at least once where it's someone's harassing your girl. Are you going to do something, or are you going to walk away with your girl? And you get put between that rock and a hard place. And you saw that happen in a very public space.
Yeah, at that space specifically, some people said it was staged, and some people say it wasn't staged. And obviously the walk up, the actor slap and whatever, and it could have been, could have been not. But I'm also like, we should hone on a little bit more about the commitment. When you watch his like YouTube series where he did a bunch of vlogs, it's all about his willpower and his commitment to just go to the extreme and make it basically happen. Sorry, but besides that, it's because he has a crazy commitment. He is actually top of the line actors, and yeah, he gave it all. And I mean, we should hone more on that end, because he is like really remarkable on that. I think he has a big saying about something with a wall. I forgot it. Yeah, you take over for a second. I search for the phrase.
He's searching for the phrase. So yeah, I agree with you. He has a great body of work, I think, and I think the biggest thing is that, he just has to keep working. I think that's always the biggest thing, is keep creating good. And I think it can actually start to get you past the situation. So for Will Smith, hopefully he just has more good films, more new projects coming up, and that helps keep this kind of negativity.
Yeah, I think I found like the quote, and it's, you don't set out to build a wall. You don't say, I'm going to build the biggest, baddest, greatest wall that was ever built. You start there. You say, I'm going to lay the first brick perfectly, and then so on. It's basically every day you work on your craft and you build it like from the ground up perfectly. What is like a good concept to have, but I'm like, how does that go into our theme here of you build your craft and you have to basically lay the foundation and then you have to obsess over it?
Maybe there's something hidden in that's maybe a negative. It's like a positive statement with a negative thing in it. And then that negative thing maybe being perfect. If you get to this level where everything's that intense and you have to have this perfection, I think it winds you up. So when something doesn't go right, you blow up more. I know I feel that when I have such a high level I hold for myself, that when something goes terribly wrong and I'm now a C level, D level designer, I'm like bottom, I get real unhappy about that at myself.
Okay.
So who knows? There may be something there where he's like, I'm a big name actor and I get called out about my wife. And who knows? There maybe even was a messy car ride on the way there and they got in a fight. Who you never know these things. And then he gets called out in front of all of Hollywood, in front of all the world for maybe he snapped, and maybe it's that perfection, that kind of lay down the perfect brick by brick, that maybe that's the hint.
Broke the wall.
That was the right.
Yeah, I think like also like he was like one of those actors where you build up a career over a couple of decades. It's like he was big like 20 years ago. That is the crazy part about it. So that is a different style than somebody who's like completely going crazy on their art. But most artists are like decades in. But I feel like the longer you're in it, the more distinct and different you are than the mass.
Yeah, and he came from a rap background where I think it's that stuff was more allowed, that kind of tough guy. Back in the early 90s, a lot of people forget that Will Smith was a rapper before he was an actor. Him and Tupac even went head to head on a few different things, including Jada Pinkett Smith. Yeah, so there's some funny stories there. So Will Smith was kind of, I wouldn't say that he was like from the hood or anything, but he definitely was like, he came from a harder background. So I think you see that now pop up and people are like, whoa, man, you're more refined now. You're in a different space. You're wearing a suit and tie. Yeah, and I guess to just go adjacent to someone else who got canceled, and we won't spend too much time on this guy.
Okay.
But another guy that went too far is R. Kelly. I mean, as I like searched for musicians that like are, I
feel like our self-destructiveness we're going too much in that realm versus the art realm, because he really destroyed it.
So we'll just talk like very shortly of just like the ego, I guess, is how I wanted to bring this up, because I think there's so many people we could put on this list. It was so funny after the Me Too movement after I was going down the list, I was like, dude, I could have 50 slides of just people that are in the same realm as R. Kelly that did predatorial things. But what's funny here that I think is interesting is a lot of musicians, especially, we could go down the list, and we won't go down the list, but of musicians that they make it, they have these great studio albums, they do amazing, they get platinum, double, triple platinum, and then on the back they create cult followings, and this idea of creating cults, and I want this following, and I want these people, these girls, and I want these slaves, and I want people like this. And that's what kind of killed R. Kelly, is as this stuff just keeps coming out, even years later. It's insane how that's like the hobby, right? That's like your hobby once you make it as a star, right?
Yeah, so I think like one of the biggest things is like, remove him right now because I'm not the biggest fan right now because of the whole controversy. But I feel like when you get money and power, everything gets amplified, and that is like bringing basically the best and the worst out of you, because if you can afford everything, and we're talking everything, you get everything, but you will be judged by the masses to whatever amount. And there's some things that are more widely accepted, and there's some things that are less accepted. And I think that is the thing that was his Achilles, and obviously it was not even good or acceptable in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, it can destroy all the work that you put in there. And he probably, I don't even know how long he was in business, but I assume at least like 3 decades, or at least.
Oh yeah, exactly. And it's over. His career's over. He's so blacklisted. Another artist that I think a lot of people may know is
J.K. Rowling. Yeah, she did a lot of work. I think like the story behind her is she wrote Harry Potter in a Starbucks, or that's what everybody knows.
Yeah, she wrote Harry Potter. She wrote it down on a napkin after a very messy divorce. She was at the bottom of having no money, being divorced, and just feeling at the bottom of everything. And wrote the first ever sentences. There lived under a cupboard a boy with a peculiar scar or something. She wrote that on a napkin. And created a magical tale. I don't know if you're a Harry Potter fan. I think your wife is a big Harry Potter fan.
Yeah, like big time. I feel like with that though, it is like kind of therapy. Like you have that big pain in yourself, all the drama going on, and you escape in a world that is not perfect, but it's like you make it like interesting and sub-perfect, and because you spend so much time, you develop like the perfect world, you know what I mean? Not in the sense of like everything is magical and fine. Yes, it's magical and there's pain and suffering, but it's very detailed because you escape too. World,
exactly. Yeah, and it's very open and it's very accepting, that world, which is, I think, the biggest thing that a lot of people got from novels was that it felt like anyone could really fit into it, right? That you could be poor and become a wizard. You could be rich and become a wizard. It could be any race and become a wizard. And it was like this kind of cool story that like a lot of kids could get around. Now, to get right into kind of why is she on this list of creatives that went too far, was she started to put out opinions about, can
should kids be able to choose their own, and should there only be maybe possibly only two genders, or should we allow there to be more than one gender? Should we allow kids to not identify as genders? And it's
Yeah.
really surprising because for how open her books are and how open much of her creative work is, she really put that message out there. And
Yeah.
it's really, yeah, it's not her to a level she's canceled, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I also think like there's when you do art, and as long as you do the art and you spend all your time and effort in it, it becomes a very pure thing. You can, some of the songs are masterworks of like R. Kelly or Kanye West or whatever. No matter what you agree on the other opinions, but we're still in the end like humans, and only can be an expert in one thing. And if you then come up and be like, here's 5 other things where I have opinions about, where it didn't actually spend like that obsessive amount on it, and it's just like a very interesting opinion, to say the least, no matter what it is not as detailed and well researched as like your art, because like you didn't spend all the time and you know all about all the problems. It's not thought through. And some things are just like human desire, and not everybody needs to know everything. And I feel like when artists just commit to one thing, they should stay in that lane and just hone that even more. Because could you imagine there would be like a new book or a better book instead of focusing on like on the sexuality of the Harry Potter characters? It could have been wasted time where she could have redeveloped like a whole new book way better with dedication and obsession.
Yeah, and I think you're right when you say like when she's in the books, she's doing great. When she gets out of those books, she's maybe not doing great anymore. And there is something to be said about even the other creatives on this list. It's always the extracurricular activities that seem to get creatives in trouble. It's you've done this thing really well. You've maybe been told your whole life that you're not maybe good at doing that thing, and so you prove them wrong. And so I think in your head you get the same type of approach on most things. So I'm telling you, don't say this, but in your head you're just like everyone that when I grew up said I couldn't be an author. Now I'm an author, so I'm not going to listen to you. And I feel like sometimes that can almost get out of hand, right? Where no, we are trying to protect you. And they're like, no, you're just a naysayer. But yeah, so I think you're right. In this case, this is another case of if she would have just kept that opinion to herself, you would have been fine. The books are fine. It's not like that's in the books. It's one of those things that kind of, it's the extracurricular, and it just segue right into somewhat two other people. I think it's interesting is you can be really awesome, can be really friendly, but when you go out,
he triggered. I'm just kidding.
Ellen DeGeneres triggers Fitzsight. But no. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, there's big Hollywood money making stars that are technically not supposed to be stars. That's where she fits into my opinion. She has a show, and I'm like, it's not really funny. It's not really worth watching for me, but I'm also not like the main customer of hers. So I'm like, I just can't vibe with it. But that's just because I'm not the personality type. And when you see them from the outside, you're just like,
yeah,
good for her for doing good.
I'm not a fan of either of their shows, honestly, because there's just this weird positivity. Ooh, let's dance on couches. But what's funny is that, yet again, it's outside of the show, though, you find out they're mean people. That Ellen DeGeneres gotten a lot of flack for yelling at her staff, being super mean, condescending, breaking a lot of people, forcing people to. James Corden has been found recently to be just an ass outside of his thing, where he'll be at a restaurant and he'll be like really mean to the staff, or he'll be really mean to the people around him. And so now there's this kind of gossip going around that he's actually a really mean person. You have these people that act super nice on camera, and then off camera, super mean, super angry.
But with that being said, like I also feel like if you're an artist or you're professional really well, there's a certain degree of mastery that you have to achieve. As a host, like what we're doing right now, it's very reactive. There's not a lot of, you need to learn how to operate the camera. You need to learn how to edit or design websites. There's a lot of, the bar is way lower, but you still get like the feeling like, hey, I mastered being a host. I can do whatever I can and whatever I want. And look at them working hard and whatever. And it's not even to my standards just because they're not successful. But I'm like, if they would have been in their position to even reach that success, they would have to work harder and be more acceptant. But yeah, so they become blinded by the fame and the skill that they lack, or, you know.
I love it. You really hate her. But yeah, no, but you're right. Like it's this thing that happens in Hollywood where, they don't really work themselves up from the bottom. So they don't appreciate things. And I think we see that a lot. I see that with a lot of, I know a few designers even who have only had success. So they treat everyone like crap only because they've never had to be at the bottom. And so I think that's probably a good example. That's what's happened here too. But I know I promised you like old artists. I know I promised you. So we got two more kind of groups together here. You can't talk about artists.
Swipe.
Going over the edge. You got to talk about the man himself, Vincent van Gogh. You can't talk about artists going over the edge without going to the man himself. Yeah, I don't know how much you know about Vincent van Gogh, but
Everybody knows he's missing something.
he's missing something.
So comment down below if you think you have an idea what it is, if you can hear that.
If you can hear that. But yeah, so Vincent van Gogh, it's really interesting because he's like kind of one of those more troubled artists where there's a lot of those where he fought depression his whole life. He became an alcoholic. He was actually an absinthe addict, which is very interesting. I don't know if you've ever tried it.
No.
But
yeah, it's similar to like a gin whatever-ish, and it's that really hardcore thing that sends you over the edge a little bit.
It's like a different type of high or drunk, really, where it's like this lime green. You pour it over a sugar cube. It's big in France. It's, I think, legal here, but for a while it was illegal in the U.S. But yeah, anyway, so what's interesting about him is he struggled with this depression his whole life, and he became an alcoholic, which you'll see in a second is pretty common. But yeah, what was interesting, yet again, made beautiful work, was fairly celebrated within his circles, but it was his alcoholism. He challenged another artist into a duel. He had all these love triangles going on. He ended up famously cutting off one of his ears.
Well, that's a big commitment to his craziness.
Exactly. So there's this kind of level where it's sad for him because you see this man that sees a lot of beauty that we weren't able to see, but the side of that is he saw this kind of darkness that we also couldn't see possibly.
Yeah, I always feel like as an artist you have to be self-expressive, and if you don't really have pain or suffering going on in your life, there's not a lot that you can express that evokes emotion for other people. Like, you have to have that deep pain that shows through your art, kind of, so that other people feel something. Obviously, we all want to display like positivity and like things that make you feel good and happy. That is way harder to achieve than, oh, here's like my pain. Can you see my pain in that picture? Or can your pain relate to that picture? What is like a little bit of that? And I feel like the better you can self-express your emotions in art, the greater your art becomes. But obviously his pain was like very dark.
And I think you're 100% right. And I think sometimes you can release that pain through your art, and it can be a very nice, relaxing process, I think, where you're releasing this darkness out into the world. But I think then there's times where you're clashing with that darkness, right? Where you're like, for example, you're the #1 sunflower painter in the world, and sunflowers are always happy and everything, but you're so depressed. So now you're doing some art that isn't really releasing that darkness. You're doing something that's separate from what you actually feel. You don't feel like sunflowers, but you're a famous sunflower painter, so you have to keep painting sunflowers. And it feels like that's when it can get bad, right? When your work doesn't help relieve that darkness, and it becomes a clash where you can't really talk about that darkness anymore. I know as a designer, I feel that, right? In the communications graphic design world, we're always supposed to be happy, right? When I walk into an office,
everybody should be happy.
Yeah, I'm supposed to walk into an office and be like, "Oh, hello there. Oh yeah, this weekend I went and worked at the dog mill. Tonight I'm gonna go work at the food kitchen. Everything's great, bro. I love it. Life's great." And I could go home and be super depressed. And I think that's when things like alcoholism, drug abuse, things like that happen because they happen behind closed doors. And I think Vincent van Gogh is a good example. He creates these beautiful paintings, these very lively, happy, beautiful paintings, but then behind closed doors. So what you see here on the right, Starry Night, beautiful painting. It's something outside of himself that's beautiful. But then look on the left. Those are his self-portraits. They're dark. They're weird. They're murky. And so you see this kind of dichotomy of like, once he looks at himself, though, it's not happy, it's not beautiful.
Yeah. I feel like with that being said, like, it is a really tough thing to do, because on the one side, you want to escape reality and create art, and the more you do it, the better your art becomes. And that basically means the less you have to interact with the real world, the less problems you have. But if you then show the real world your real self, then the more problems you become, because everything is slacking. And then now people are judging you, for example, R. Kelly, on your sexuality, or on your personality, on how well you treat your employees. What was her name? Ellen, whatever. And
DeGeneres.
And little things like that, because all that stuff is slacking because you don't spend the time actually like developing the skills that you need to be like well-rounded in every aspect. So you become really sharp and defined in one aspect so that everything else is slacking. What is like really desirable and admirable on the one side, but do you really want to have the life that is required for that? You know what I mean? And I think that's an interesting struggle. If you want to be the best web designer, whatever, and you just like sleep, eat, and spend your life at the computer, and it's not really desirable. And we have to ask ourselves, do we want to be an artist? Do we want to be like just a professional, or do we just want to make some money, or whatever it is? But we have to define what we want to be and see what the cost is.
You're 100% right. I love what you're saying there. It's, yeah, do you want to give everything to being an artist? Does that need to be your 100% of your identity, or should you allow room outside of that? And I think us as creatives, we would like to think of ourselves like, oh yeah, I'd love to be just an artist, but I think the truth is that we all run into is that there's more to that, right? That you need to allow more outside of that. But yeah, me as a web designer, yeah, in theory, you would think I would want to be a web designer 100% of the time, but I just can't. It'll create too much stress. It doesn't allow that room for wanting love or having pain.
You're not broke enough, Sean. You need to have more pain in your life that you just commit. Oh yeah, coding is fine. I love it. Please don't take me back to the real world. You know what I'm...
Someday I do want to record like a me mad recording. I just want to have a webcam. I just have a montage of me during every coding problem. Just like, I hate this. Why do I even do this? I don't even... It's like the most negative things I yell out in the universe when a piece of code doesn't work. It's just...
Yeah.
Who even needs the internet?
And I mean, like, that is, I don't know, because on the one side, it's like playing guitar. We both, I think, have played guitar, and everybody wants to be, like, successful playing guitar. Everybody wants to be, like, that super rock star and whatever. But most people are not willing to put in the hours and the pain to actually do it. And you can judge, like, people on their commitment to the things they want. Because a lot of people say they want the podcast, and then they do 2 or 3 or 4, maybe 6 podcasts, and then it's dead. And you can judge everything on the commitment. And I think that is a very beautiful thing. Like, how far are you willing to go for something?
Yeah. I think you're right. There's this. God, there's a better way to say this. I know there was a better statement.
It's like, always special for me.
There's like the murky gray. There's something like that. But the idea of there's this point in every creative project, and the more you do it, the less you realize you're doing it, where you step out into the murky gray, into the thing where there's no proof that anything you do is, and that murky gray may go on for months. Like this podcast has gone on. We've seen that there's some success, right? But it hasn't been like, oh, we're making tons of money, we're successful podcasters. So we're still in that murky gray ourselves. I think a lot of people are scared of that. So like talking about guitar, to be a famous guitarist, you have to go to the venue and have 3 people standing there watching your show. You need to do that. How many times? Maybe 100 times. You need to do the awkward gigs where someone stole your cables, and you need to do the awkward gigs where your strings on your guitar broke and you didn't have replacement strings, so now the whole gig's ruined. And you need to have like podcasts where the audio goes out in the middle of it. Now you have to edit it together just to make it work. So it's that kind of murky gray that you have to be okay with working in. And I feel like a lot of people don't. I think that's ultimately once they get out there and they're like, okay, I'm not getting a lot of likes, I'm not getting any money, things are going wrong. It can be better, but I don't quite know how. Once those things start to fly in, I think people get scared. And I know for me in guitar, I wanted to be a famous guitarist, but for me, it was like the band around me fell apart. They all were like, I don't know about this. I don't believe in this. And then for me, it was like a partnership thing where as the partners fell through, I was like, are you going to do this alone? Are you going to be that murky guitarist out in the murky gray by yourself? And I was like, no, I don't think I can do that. So that was when I stepped away from guitar.
Yeah. For me, it was like I felt like, okay, when I do something, I don't want to I pick it up and I set it down because like people judge you. Like your parents give you something when you're a kid and they're like, yeah, that will be probably laying in the corner for the rest of the time after we bought it. The first 3 weeks, great, and then it lays there and doesn't do anything. But, and that's what I got told, and I'm like, nah. I always wanted to disprove it, and then I'm like, when you become an adult, you have to weigh everything. How much stuff and time you have to put into this to make it work, and do you want to do that? What is your commitment level? And I feel like you have to be sometimes like childlike and just try new things and commit really badly to them. And the older you get, the less commitment, the less craziness, and the less experimental things you will do. And I'm like, it is not sustainable to just do whatever you did before as an adult, because it will become less successful and effective. Because you see it in a web designer world, like back in the day, like everybody needed a website. Now everybody has a website, and like the needs and the effectiveness of our services are like very interesting, especially with AI. You have to go the extra mile now and experiment with more things, what you wouldn't have to do back in the day, because it's like, it's less rare, kind of.
Yeah, and right now, I think I'm seeing this more for myself too right now, is that the murky gray too is defining, are you a web designer now? Are you a videographer now? I think I've talked about it before of like, we're all becoming art directors, creative directors. Should I start to call myself an art director, creative director? Should I start to today say, hey, there's AI, hey, there's all these things, hey, there's technology creeping up, and frankly, young people are creeping up too, that are going to be willing to do the things cheaper and maybe be a little bit more technologically capable than even we are.
Yeah.
So is it time for me to now go into the murky gray of what does Sean look like? What is Sean the company
I just have like right now on that like a very interesting theory. Let's imagine you're a kiddo and you're just like, I want to have a website. I use now 5 tools that are free or are rather cheap to get, like AI based, whatever. You practice with those tools, you get some results, and you start now your service. I make websites with those. We are a generation who had access to the internet, and it's not like that we are like the 40-year-olds back in the day when we were kiddos. Those people did not have basically the internet. We're the first generation with the internet growing old. We were not like at a point where you're like, okay, now I stop learning and this is my profession. Our generation is like, oh, there's this thing going on. Everything is changing constantly, and we're still always learning. So nobody was in the spot right now. So we should not accept, oh, we're becoming old, and we should do whatever we do. We should be just evolving, because like maybe our brains are capable of, and just the older generation before us just didn't have the tools, and nobody knows what would happen if they would have kept learning. Because like we're an organism that basically can grow and change. And I feel like that is a really strong thing if you really believe in it and commit like in the time learning and basically decide now, okay, I need to build a new foundation and get like all the AI tools that are relevant to me and play with this, play with that, play with this, play with that, and just build a new foundation plus the old tools that you have. Because like you're an AI using AI, and you know what I mean?
I think so. I think I love your saying of not getting caught in the sauce or whatever, or not getting lost in the sauce. And I love that idea when you say that of, let's not focus on the tools. Let's not even focus on the output, but what is it that you like? Like, what gets you going? I think I've talked about, like, when I was a kid, if I was to redo stuff, I'd maybe go this direction. Because I think when we were in high school, and this may still be true for high schoolers, we were told, don't think about the things you actually kind of want to do. You need to think about what society needs you to do, and you need to get as close to what society needs, where it's not too far away from what you want. But now what I would tell high schoolers is, if you're that dork that likes to draw lots of castles or draw lots of fantasy maps, I think 10, 15, 20 years ago, they would have told you, like, hey, it seems like you're artistic. Maybe you should become a graphic designer. So
you graphic designers out there, you're a little bit artistic, apparently.
And so like, you should do these things that society wants you to do. You're good at making maps. Maybe you should be like a city planner or something.
Yeah.
No, I like making fantasy maps. No, that's not realistic. You should be a city planner or an engineer. And so I think we're now entering a place of, no, that's called a niche. Why don't you just go 100% and throw that against the wall and be like, I'm going to make custom maps. I'm going to make fantasy drawings, and I'm going to use AI. I'm going to use all these tools. There's free tools now even. I'm going to go to all these events, and there's all these places I can sell my work. So booyah, mom and dad. I'm not going to become a city planner. I'm going to make fantasy maps. And I think it's like the times are changing now, where like a kid growing up is, if they have the right people talking to them, is don't think about the tools. Don't think about the output. What is it that you like? What is it that you want to see create? What gets you excited? And just put everything at that, like web design, illustration, whatever. Learn everything you need to make that thing cool.
Yeah, I feel like also, let's say you're 30, like age range. And I saw it yesterday.
I'm 27, but I don't know about
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I'm just joking.
Yeah,
I'm really depressed.
the struggle is real. Yeah, no, I'm a 5-year-old. I know. Oh, yeah. But basically,
the body's 45.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yesterday I saw a video and I felt like it was very interesting. And it was about like a guy went to a mob boss, and it's like the mob boss was like 50 or whatever, very old. And he's giving me a city tour. And that was the whole concept about the movie. He wanted to have a city tour from a mob boss who's retired, trying to change his life. And he's an older man. That older man experienced a lot of things. And there was a different urgency in that old person trying to show all the things that he saw and experienced. And I feel like when you're like a younger man or younger woman or whatever you are, there's no urgency anymore. We're getting into a level where it's like, you're a kid, you want to do everything. Everything has a high urgency. Then you become whatever, adultish, and the urgency is gone, and you just want to do what is needed. And then you become older, and you're like, oh, there's a big urgency on everything. So he was like running around trying to show him this spot and that spot and this. And you felt that in the personality type where the young man is like a little bit more laid back. And I'm just like, if that would be career related, like we in there, we should do this a little bit and we should be that. And I wish there was that, see, like where it's, oh no, I'm 50, gotta play with this new tool, I gotta play with that, and I'm gonna play with this. And we're just like becoming theirs. I don't know if it's a hormone thing or if it's like just a comfortable thing, but that urgency I feel is like very necessarily that you're like, I need to create this art, I need to do this, I need to learn this. And I feel like there's a lot of fire that we are missing out and we should commit to, and we should just be aware of like where you are in life, and maybe you should just put things on fire just to get that urgency.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think that's a lot of great points there. I think in terms of, I think it all obviously comes down to morality, part of it, right? That like we're feeling the back pain. We're seeing our energy levels decline over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
We're seeing these things. We even see how COVID really aged us all forward quite a bit. And so I think you're right. But when you're young, I think there is that kind of adage of live forever. And I'm not going to do that whole getting old thing. I'm going to skip that. I don't know about these guys. I'm just going to not get old. And you just have these kind of thoughts like that. So I think the saddest thing for young people happens now that I felt as someone that came out with crippling student debt is that young people are put in this place where they're focusing more on money than anything else. How many friends did growing up that just worked at a fast food joint for years, not like for a little bit, but for 4, 5, 6 years, or maybe now they're like a manager of a Sonic or something, and they get in these bubbles where they put all their energy and effort into this money, and they even get told by these corporations, like in this weird, almost abusive way of, stay in, and we'll just keep promoting you, and don't go to college, we'll make you a facilities manager, or like this like area manager, and we'll just keep promoting you and throwing money on you. Like I knew people that actually made pretty good money being like working at a Burger King or something, being like a regional manager. So they're making 58, 60 grand a year now. And you're like, wow, that's pretty good. But then they work 60, 70-hour weeks managing a Burger King. And now they're like 30s. Now they're about to become in their 40s. And you're right. How much did they put towards their old stuff? I know a guy that used to be a guitarist, where now he's a manager of these restaurants in Canyon City. And you could say, sure, he seems like he's probably making 50, 60, 70 a year, but is he playing guitar? Is he being creative? Not at all. He just lives in the restaurant business now, and I don't even think he loves doing it.
Yeah, there's a saying, like, if you want to become a millionaire, you have to go at least, like, 7 times bankrupt or 6 times, whatever. And if you're not willing, like, that is, like, the play factor. We don't play with things because we could go bankrupt. And it would be the end of the
way, baby. We're doing my first one soon.
Hey, I personally want to go bankrupt so that I'm, like, closer to step 6. And I'm like, we're less worried about the real things, because what you want is like to just gain the next time more money faster, because the second attempt is always better. When I moved from Germany to a different town, not so successful. Then I moved to a different town, the moving process got better. Then I moved to America, way game changer. But I'm like, I moved a lot around. I moved, I think, 10 times in Germany from A to B, different towns, so my friend circle was not as big because of that, but I learned to adapt. And I feel like that is like a skill that you have to have. If you're like not willing to fail with the student loans and just work the Sonic, that is very bad, but you have to fuck it up. That's one of my biggest pep talks, where I'm like, you got to fuck it up so you can make it better the next time, and you know what to do and what works and what doesn't work. So I feel like people are too afraid of fucking it up and not doing it. And
and also like feeling, and not just being afraid of screwing up, but like letting the screwing up destroy them. This is going to show a little bit of my EDM love, but I'll always remember an old Deadmau5 statement where they asked him, this is probably 20 years ago or something, in a DJ. They were, if you were to talk to a lot of the up and coming DJs and tell them like, what are they doing wrong? How do I become Deadmau5? What did Deadmau5 do that other DJs haven't done? He's just fail. Just go out there and stop making fun of the DJs that mess up, like, period. Because if we're messing up on stage, that means we're trying stuff. That means we're pushing it to the very limits of what we can do. So don't just pile drive these DJs that mess up at a show. Because if they mess up, it's not because they're being idiots. It's because they're pushing boundaries. And so I like that idea. Build that into the process. There's going to be mess ups. If you're not messing up, you're not pushing the limits.
Exactly. And I think that goes beautiful with our topic beforehand, because all those big artists, they did something and they failed. And like I said already, every publicity is good publicity, but you have to be able to stand the pain. Like, the thing is, like, the thing that's failing, that's fine. Everything is about to fail at one point or another. The thing is, like, what you do at that jumping point. Do you go down with it, or you use that momentum, that publicity for the next big stunt that pays for all that beforehand. And that is like one of the things where, let's say you get like a viral Karen video and you're the guy filming it, or you are the Karen. What do you do with this moment? You get a lot of publicity. You can monetize that in many ways, but you have to be able to stand the pain and use that force that is coming towards you and direct it in a way that it benefits you. And Van Gogh cutting up his ear, he used that publicity stunt maybe, or that craziness, to produce more art, and it got him a shout out, and he was able to stand it and still doing his art. It's not like that he stopped drawing.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point that he could have just cut off his ear and done nothing about it in his art and never painted anything about it. And
yeah, and that would have been the downfall. That is,
and he still had a downfall, but it's interesting is that even that act has become famous now. Even him doing that has helped him become more famous. And so I think I would almost say in all of these cases that we showed, their core thing that they're good at, right? So if Kanye West was still just a great rapper, if J.K. Rowling would have just kept going down the Harry Potter books and focusing on those, if DeGeneres and James Corden just focused on being as good people in the show and do that outside the show, if R. Kelly would have just kept making great albums and stopped doing his stuff, and if Will Smith would have just kept focusing on just the movies and not let that explode out of, the best thing that can happen is in your thing that you do. And so if anything else happens, let's say you have some controversy happen outside of what you do, still do what you do, because that thing is going to push everything forward, I think. So even if you get canceled outside, keep doing what you do well. You'll keep moving forward. You will survive.
And don't get
me CK. Look at other people that are like doing stuff still, and so they keep going. They got canceled, but they keep moving forward.
Yeah, and I think like it's more about like how can you deal with that hate, because we'll probably receive like 90% or 95% after you got canceled for whatever reason, justified or not. That is a lot to push through, because some people will take everything very personally, and you should reflect on yourself and you should do the things that you should do, but you should still do the thing. But it will be a rough couple months till that fades out. And sometimes I think like Donald Trump, for example, he got a lot of flack, but he was like, he milked the controversy in many ways, and he still kept pushing through it, and he used the controversy to get more followers, because, oh, you say one thing, and now other people talking about him, and some people that talked about him basically show other people who would agree with him on some aspects, and it was like basically becoming like a chain virus. People would share it just because of they agreed or disagreed.
Yeah, and I use Donald Trump these days as an example of just keep going in his case too. How much stuff that guy's had thrown at him in the last few years, and he just keeps moving forward, and he keeps focusing on the same thing that he focused on years ago, which is becoming president, is the same stuff that he's always talked about. So it's like, so I think it's that too. Just be stubborn. Be stubborn about what you want in this world. And if you just stay stubborn, you'll get it. Like you can bankrupt 100 times, you can go to jail, you can have all these things go wrong. But if you
sometimes you need that. It's an arc, and it's like really depending what you do with that story arc. Sometimes you need to get canceled so that you can reflect and become the better person, and go to jail. And I should rather done this and do it the right way. And then the next time you build the foundation correctly. Obviously, don't go to jail and don't do bad things. But just if you
do, leave a comment below if that's worked out for you going to jail. And get it. But yeah, so to wrap up this episode, which I think has been a great episode, by the way, is when creativity goes too far, like what does that look like? And I think we both saw that it's outside of your focus. And so what do you do if something goes wrong? Well, go back to the focus. Go back to what's the juice. What's the thing that gets you excited? Because I think that excitement will save you. I think that excitement will cover all of the darkness if you can just focus on that. What gets you excited?
And I feel like also what has to be mentioned is sometimes we're confused and it's like, what should we do? And we just think too much. And that is like the confusion that a human has to endure. And in that times, just do your work, and then your work is your art, and then everything is like going full circle, and then you just like you do art and everything works out. That's at least how I see it, but I need to commit to that commitment more. And I'm like, my buddy inspired me. I'm like, okay, I want to do that more. Like when I saw that mob guy doing that, I'm like, oh, he's 50 years old giving that young kid a city guide, and they're going down that hill, and like he must have so many body aches and whatever, and he's not complaining. He's excited to show. I'm just like, if I would be like right now there, I'm like, oh no, I don't feel like it. And I wouldn't give the tour guide with that excitement. And I'm like, yeah, that guy knows he has pain. He doesn't care. He just wants to show whatever he's excited about. And we need this fire.
Yeah, exactly. I think that you're exactly right. So I think even in that example, it's just moving forward. Just, yeah, don't look in the past. Don't look in the back too much. Don't over-criticalize. Don't try to overanalyze everything. Just keep moving. Just keep moving forward. Yeah, man, I think going forward on this podcast, we're going to keep doing that, right? We're just going to keep moving forward. And I think things will start to congeal, right? Because positivity, right? I think we give positivity. And I think as long as we keep putting out the positivity, hopefully you good people out there will keep subscribing, liking, buying, like this beautiful coffee cup.
I'm so excited about giving my coffee mug because all the words on it, that is the selling part. It's not about that it's about us. It's about all the creative words that you put on there. I'm like, it's a genius idea. And it's a fun mug to read on if you have that. Yeah. Yeah. And as we said, with this podcast, for example, everything gets better the more often you do it. And the frequency matters. Life wants to hold you back with the frequency of, oh, there's bills, there's this, and there's that. Does it work? Doesn't work? Yada, yada, yada. But the longer you do a thing, the bigger the waves become. And you have to keep on pushing those waves. Even though they're in the beginning tiny, everything will lead up to something big.
I like that. Everything will lead up to something big. So
unless you quit, that's the only like on the other podcast that I did. After episode, I think 40 or so, I got the first $1,000, and that is then spike. I'm like, it takes some time.
Yeah. And get back to just what you love. If you love what you do, it doesn't even matter. I have to do that live. Where just post the art, just make the art. It's not about getting the love and getting the likes. It's about you making it. That's the whole gift. So
I saw.
We have to think that way.
Yeah, I saw a post about podcasting. Girls are like on Twitter saying like, why do guys always start a podcast? Why can they not just go to a therapist or whatever? And I'm just like, the response was really nice. Like, why do girls always start an OnlyFans instead of getting a job? What was a very funny post, but I'm just like, this is what I'm getting out of this podcast. It's not like about the money in the beginning, but it's about like, okay, I'm learning about business. I'm learning about creativity. I'm reflecting on self about, am I an artist? Am I doing the right things? Should I do other things? Because the more input you get and the bigger you build a community, the better it is. So if you're an artist, just comment down below. We like hearing from you, and maybe we will see your art and be like, whoa, this is dope. And it's all about building momentum, communities, and just keep on doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think you're 100% right. I think it's just, you just got to love what you do. You got to love the game. And I think this podcast, I agree. It's the biggest thing it's helped me is just talking about the thing I love.
Yeah.
And that there's no bad in that. So, so I'm excited, man. I'm excited to keep moving forward with you. I think we got some other fun stuff up our sleeve, but anything else you want to share?
I think if you're listening right now, Sean and I usually have a discussion beforehand or afterwards, and if you want to become like a member of the discussion, besides obviously our 1 hour podcast that is themed about topics, you should be tipping or donating to our program, and then you can be part of that and listen, maybe talk to us, maybe give us some input about your business and your struggle, or maybe become a partner on that. And I feel like we can implement that because like we have the capabilities of, hosting multiple people there and have like discussions with them and like maybe coaching them, because Sean is in freelance for like multiple years. I'm in freelance for a couple of years, but not as successful as him. We can teach and learn from each other, and that you can be part of that community for a small donation of $1 million.
$1 million is the starting fee. That's how much my time's worth. But so to kind of second that, we will be setting up in the next, maybe by the time this comes out, we'll see how fast we are, but we are going to be setting up a subscription kind of based thing on Spotify and
or Anchor. We will see. But
same thing. They're the same thing. Spotify's the only one where you can do it. I wish Apple Podcasts you could do donations and stuff, but you can't. So it's only Spotify. But you can subscribe on there, and we are going to be coming out with new content, just as they said. So if you have ideas for content, obviously email us, message us as well. We'd love to hear from you. But there'll be some new videos. Maybe there'll be some walkthroughs. Maybe it'll be more R-rated stuff. Who knows? We're playing with a lot of ideas.
Yeah, so right now I feel like the real business world where we're struggling, because we talk about what you're struggling with at the moment or what works at this moment, what should we do, what we shouldn't do. And being part of the community can lead to good things. And just like maybe getting the one idea that pushes you over the edge where you're like, make some more money. Because it can be as simple as double your prices and see what happens. And sometimes that changes everything. And it's a little thing.
Yeah. So I think on the subscription side, I know I'm going to be more willing to show the backside of how my stuff is done. I think on this podcast, I don't really like to show a lot of the inner workings. I don't like to put it out in the public, but putting something behind a paywall, I think, makes me feel a little
if it's
bit more
private, that's something different.
Exactly.
Because then you can talk about it. And
And yeah, so if any of you out there, if you have any ideas, and even if you want to be on this podcast, like for real, if you've never been on a podcast, you want to have your first experience, email us as well. We'd love to have you on because, yeah, it's a community. We're just trying to build a little bit of a community here.
Yeah, and on that note, let's turn off the recording and we talk about what goes on in Sean's life and my life. Have
All
a
right,
good one.
Bye, everybody.